Here we go, episode 24, Entrepreneur App with David Brickley and Brett Regan. We're on YouTube, iTunes, Facebook Live, and SoundCloud.
And Medium?
Yeah, Medium too. We are joined by Sara Brooks from Covet PR. We appreciate you coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So yeah, I think one of the reasons we started this podcast is really to talk to other entrepreneurs and hear about their journey. I know I'm inspired and kind of fascinated with everybody's story and how it came to be. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Covet PR and what you guys do?
Sure, well, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
I think this is great what you're doing. So Covet PR is a national public relations agency that focuses on food, beverage, and beauty brands in the health and wellness space. So we really, we focus on products versus necessarily restaurants or hotels or people, and our focus is really on better for you brands. So I always say if you go to Whole Foods, you can probably find 20 or 30 of our clients across the refrigerated section, the aisles, the beauty section. So there's this big kind of convergence right now of, you know, what you put in your body and what you put on your skin, and how everything is very intrinsically connected. And, you know, consumers are becoming a lot more savvier, and millennials are making a lot of these purchases. And so it's a really exciting time to be in a space that's focused specifically on this industry, which is growing, you know, by billions every year.
Yeah, to your point, it's kind of a recent phenomenon, right? Like people are starting to get more healthy. Even we talk about all the time, like Tough Mudder and all these races. People are paying hundreds of dollars to work out.
Yeah.
So is that something that inspired you as that movement started to happen? You decided to go more in that niche space?
Yeah, I mean, kind of to go back and how I even got into PR, if we want to go way back.
Yeah,
so let's go. So I wanted to be a talk show host, so that was always my dream. I grew up watching Oprah every day. This is like before TiVo, so I'd record her 4 o'clock show and come home, and I was always really fascinated by stories of how things came to be and people, and I was committed that I was going to be a talk show host. So I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. I came out to San Diego to go to University of San Diego, and I was like, how can I become a talk show host? So I'm like, I'm going to go on reality TV. So I've been on this like reality TV stint where I went on Wheel of Fortune, like from Wheel of Fortune to like MTV dating shows.
Nice.
And I was just like putting myself out there. This was obviously not very strategic because I don't think you go on like a dating show and get dismissed and then.
Was it Next?
This was pre-Next. It was Room Raiders.
Wow.
Okay.
So I like raided 3 guys' rooms. It was Dismissed, which is where you go on a date with
parents,
your friend.
right?
That again was after my generation. But it was of this time, and so I was also writing a book on dating. I was, doing the news at USD. I was just trying to do whatever I could. And I think it was a hard dose of reality that, you know, to become a talk show host, you know, maybe that isn't the direct path. So I went to USD, had a great experience there, and then moved to LA. And I moved 2 blocks from E! News. And I had no friends, I had no idea, and I went into their HR department and I was like, I really want to work here. This is my lifelong dream. I want to work for Ryan Seacrest. And I got a job the next day. So I worked at E! For a while. I was in development, so I was working on kind of, people would pitch TV shows, and this was during the, you know, reality craze, like, heyday. So the Anna Nicole Smith show.
Wow.
Kind of, you know, everybody was trying to get on TV and tell their story. So I was inching my way to get there, and had a really amazing time working in development. So basically looking at people pitching their shows, working with the producers, doing some stuff with E! News, with Daily 10, which is a show back then. And after a little while, I was like, I just can't do celebrities all day in and out. I remember, you know.
Mentally exhausted.
And I remember the very tragic day Anna Nicole Smith died, but I didn't leave my desk for 5 days. And I was like, I graduated college with 4.0. I think there's something bigger for me out there.
I want to go ahead.
Yeah.
So when you started out going on these different TV shows, because I find that really interesting.
Yeah.
Was that, other than just being fun and getting out there, were you able to learn when you were on set and get an understanding of the industry?
Exactly. So my first MTV show I went in, I was just for fun. I was a freshman in college. They're like, we'll send a limo, we'll take you up to LA. I was like, I have made it. This is the life.
Now, is it easy to get on these shows for you?
I don't know. You know, I was not born with a bone of like shame or fear or whatever.
But you have a very friendly personality, so I feel like if you like sit in front of somebody, it's like.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I love talking to people.
Yeah.
I really, so I don't know how to answer that. For me, it was just very natural to kind of talk about my life. And so I actually started casting for MTV. So I was on the first MTV show, then I was talking to the producers. I was like, what do you look for in people? And then I casted for Pimp My Ride. We actually, you know, looking back, I feel like we probably broke like a million laws, but we went to Tijuana to do casting where all these American students would like take buses down to Tijuana. And so it was just a crazy time. I just tried to put myself anywhere and everywhere that I could be. And it was almost as helpful to learn what I didn't like as opposed to what I
How much did you
like.
learn from Exhibit during that
Oh,
process?
a lot.
Yeah.
You know, a lot.
Dropping knowledge.
So let's back up a little bit.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your upbringing and
Sure.
if that was back in Tucson.
Yeah.
And
So I actually think my upbringing or maybe my birth order had a role in this. I'm the youngest, and so I was always fighting for attention. I was the youngest of all girls.
How many?
3. Okay. My sisters and I are super, super different. My dad is a doctor. We have no entrepreneurs in the family. Everyone did the very safe route. You know, you go to med school or you do this or you do that. And I thought at one point maybe I want to be a doctor, but I can't stand the sight of blood and I suck at science. So I always kind of beat to my own drum, and my parents were really wonderful about not kind of trying to fit, you know, their kids in these certain, you know, squares and circles. So I was given, you know, full autonomy to explore whatever I wanted to do. I don't have an athletic bone in my body, so I like didn't do sports. So I just talked a lot, and I just met people, and I was super, super social. But I wasn't, I was just kind of in this environment where you could just be yourself. And, you know, I think to this day, my parents are still shocked this is where I am because I went very untraditional routes. You know, we can get into a little later, but, you know, left this great job at E, moved to New York. I didn't have one friend. I didn't have a job. And I was like, I will work at Condé Nast. And I've always just kind of, you know, taken a leap and then hoped it worked out. And I think part of that is my parents.
Okay. So what was the first, we asked this to everybody, what was your first entrepreneurial hustle as a kid? So when you look back, I always tell the story, I sold mixed CDs back in the day where for $5, but it took me 17 hours because downloading songs took 45 minutes back then.
Oh yeah, Napster.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember that.
LimeWire.
Probably babysitting and coming up with different equations for, you know, one kid maybe this, but 2 kids it's this, and it's actually
scaling.
Yeah, I think I was very good at scaling. Mm-hmm. I think I was an excellent Girl Scout. I think I probably sold the most amount of cookies ever. I think I used I would try to find places where nobody would ever stake out. I would never went to typical, you know, grocery store outside the grocery store. We would go outside like high schools or colleges where, you know, like 18-year-old hormonal boys could eat anything and wanted things. So I think I always had like a natural hustler bone in my body.
Gotcha.
And probably did a lot of things that I didn't even realize at the time were entrepreneurial.
And outside of that, did you have any normal jobs?
I did like hostessing. I did kind of worked in restaurants, did all of that. But I always tried, whatever job I had, I always tried to be like, what's the end goal of this? And I mean, at hostessing, I would, you know, meet people that would then lead to these crazy stories. I mean, I was just, as long as I could talk, I was like, I can work anywhere. As long as this leads to something, I was always looking for opportunities.
So talk about the educational background. Were you a good student early on, elementary, high school?
Yeah, I graduated USD with a 4.0, college with a 4.0. I think I've always been, you know, I think there's people who are really book smart and then there's people who really apply themselves. I wasn't someone who necessarily got the lesson the first time, but I probably cumulatively had about like 5,000 flashcards. I lived in flashcards. So I was someone who just worked really hard. I went to office hours. I did everything I could, but I was never one of those kids who just got it. It was frustratingly so. But I think having that work ethic and not accepting anything less was actually better than just being super, super naturally.
See, I was always the opposite.
smart.
I think you were too, just procrastinating and not studying as much as you should.
I hear that from so many successful entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And I wish that. I remember being in astronomy class senior year and just be like, I don't get the solar system. How does everyone get the solar system?
But that's the entrepreneur mindset too. It's like, I have to find a way to figure this out because it's so frustrating. I have to find a way to make it work for me.
Totally.
So that's one side of it too.
And did you enjoy the social aspect of school? Were you involved in anything, not sports?
Yeah, so college, I worked for the news. I did a lot of volunteering. I studied abroad my junior year in Italy, which was awesome. I was working at MTV. I worked at a magazine called 944, which no longer is around, but I worked there for 2 years. And so that's kind of my first foray into figuring out, I knew I wanted to be in this world of media. And I was like, do I want to be in front of the camera? Do I want to be behind the camera? Do I want to be writing the scripts? So I had all that with casting, with doing TV shows, and then working for 944. So I started to really figure out where my strengths were and, you know, what interests me.
And what were you studying at USD?
Communications and English.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said you graduated right around 05, so that was before kind of the crisis, financial crisis, or that we had there. So when you graduate, how's the job outlook like? Did you land right away? Was it tough?
You know, I went straight to LA. So in 2005, I was in LA for a bit. I worked at E! And then in 2007, I was like, okay, I think I want to work for a big magazine. I love my time at 944. I was starting to feel that maybe the talk show host thing was going to be a little tougher. So I moved to New York, and in 2007, I mean, this is when everything was booming. Like, you could get a job wherever, people were throwing money, and so I moved to New York City, and I went and I interviewed at Condé Nast and Hearst and all these, you know, big glossy publishers. And, you know, I was offered a job to be an editorial assistant, and I think the starting salary was $21,000. And at this point, you know, people, they're like, oh, but you'll have as many free samples as you want. And I was like, I don't know if I can live like with free blazers.
Oof,
yeah. So I was running out of money. I had like a month before my dad was like, you need to come back and get a real job. And I was at a gym and I was working out, and this girl next to me looked so familiar, and I said, how do I know you? And it turns out we went to USD, and I was like, I do not know what I'm gonna do. I'm like, I thought I was gonna do this. I'm feeling totally just defeated. New York was super competitive. And she's like, have you ever thought about PR? And quite frankly, I hadn't thought about PR. And she said, I just got this email from a headhunter. I'm really happy where I am. I'll forward this email to you. And it was for this great agency in New York, this top agency that works with fashion and beauty clients. And I went in and I interviewed, and I totally like BS my way. I had no PR experience, but I took all my past media experience and said, this is actually why you want someone who doesn't come from a straight PR experience. And I got the job, and I was there for over 5 years. Wow. And it was wonderful. So that's where I started really PR. And I was like, wow, I'm pitching editors, so I'm working with magazines. I'm writing creative stories. It kind of, to me, was like, this is exactly what I was meant to do.
And what was the agency that you were working with?
Siren Public Relations, which is still there, and it's an amazing agency, a great team. And I mean, worked really long hours. I look now and I'm really proud that I have a company where people come in at 9 and leave at 6, but I'm also like, oh my God, that was not how it was for me.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, almost everybody that we've talked to has some little like nugget story where something just kind of came to them. Do you feel like that was meant to be, or just a coincidence?
I do. I mean, I do believe in kind of things converging when they're supposed to converge. And I think I would have figured it out on my own. I don't know if it would have been in 2 months or 2 years. And to your point, what happened in 2008, you know, shortly after I got that job, you know, fall of 2008 happened, and, you know, so many of the staff was let go. And PR is one of the first things people cut when they're looking at their budget. It's for a lot of brands, it's a nice thing to have, but it's not necessary. It's not a salesperson, it's not a tech guy. So we were losing clients left and right. And I think that's when I also became aware that, you know, I'm in an industry that is very, very kind of affected by what's happening on a national scale as well.
And at the company that you were working with, what was their core clientele?
Beauty and fashion. So I was on the beauty side. So I worked with clients. I worked with hair care like Tresemme and Kerastase and Schumer. Your lady listeners will know about this. But beauty brands, Dermalogica, Noxema, New York Fashion Week, worked on Project Runway and some shows that had some of our stylists on it. So it was a really great kind of a variety of things that really let me figure out if I was good at PR.
So talk about day-to-day there, because when Tresemme comes to you, do they just essentially give you guys their KPIs and what they're trying to achieve, and you are trying to get as many magazine ads and out of home, or like what's the...
Yeah, so PR, the best way I describe PR in general is we're a matchmaker between a brand and the media. So we don't do any advertising, we don't do any sales. We sell in the sense that we're always trying to sell the brands, but we work strictly with earned media.
It's almost organic way to get
exactly.
into media.
So what we, you know, pride ourselves on, a good publicist will have really good relationships, so they'll know if they're pitching Allure magazine, what this editor likes, what they just wrote about. They'll also know how to not sound like every other publicist and just send like, you know, BCC emails. So when a client like a trusted mate comes to us, one of the first things you do in PR is you say, what's your new news? So what are you launching? What are you focusing on? How can we creatively bring that to the media? How do we tell this story in a way that hasn't been done? What innovation is new? What are you doing new from an R&D standpoint? And then we create the narrative and the strategy, and how are we going to target the Today Show? How are we going to target the New York Times? And now, which we can get into later, but now it's how you're going to target influencers. So PR it's an interesting industry, like medicine and technology and so many things have changed, but PR, just in this day and age, you have to pretty much evolve your business on a monthly basis to stay relevant.
Sound familiar?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, which I think is exciting, but it's also how much do you want to invest in something that may be a trend or a fad.
Amen.
Yeah, so it's always every week every day is like, okay, what's happening now? What technology was just launched that we have to keep up with to be relevant for our brands?
Let's remember to go off on that tangent for a second. But I want to know, when you're there in 2007, you worked there for 5 years, you said.
Yeah.
At what point, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they work for a big company like that, and they look at the top and say, I can do what they're doing.
Yeah.
So was there a moment, or at what point do you say, like, I can spin this off and do my own thing?
At that point, no. At that point, I was still like, no way. Like, I'm someone who I definitely am very ballsy and will do it. But I also saw all the headaches that came with it, from HR to employees to dealing with financial crises and making these really hard. And I was very appreciative at that time that I could come in and come out. And we had a really great culture there, where the boss at that point, you weren't allowed to check your emails after work. I don't know how that could be now, but there was a balance, even though I worked really long hours. So at that point, I was like, I know I want to do PR. And I eventually came back to San Diego, and that's when I was like, okay, I want to do PR here, and that's when I was looking at my options.
So what made you leave New York?
All right, well, you want the real story?
I love the real story.
The real story was I had a very long-term relationship in New York, and he never wanted to leave New York, and I always wanted to come back west. My family's here, and it got to a point where it was just like one of us was going to have to commit, and he, I think, had a hard time committing in life. So I decided that, I think I was 28 at that time.
With or without you?
29, and I was like, I'm leaving, and I left. And so personally, it was a very hard decision. I had an amazing career, I had amazing friends, but I knew ultimately where I wanted to really make my mark, I wanted to do it back on the West.
And just to be close to the family and have that.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And I love New York, but it's a tiring lifestyle. It's expensive, it's cold, it's a lot. And I think I wouldn't have traded one day, but I knew eventually I wanted to get back west.
So when you landed back in San Diego.
It's like 2012 we're talking?
That was December 2011.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you land back in San Diego, are you going headfirst into entrepreneurship, or are you trying to find jobs?
No, so I had a dear friend that I worked with at my agency in New York, and the day that I came, it was her last day, and I was taking her job, and she was moving to San Diego, and we always stayed in touch. And there's an amazing agency here in town, and they focus more on travel and hospitality. So it wasn't necessarily product PR, but it was an amazing agency. So that's where I landed when I came here. Okay,
but at that point in time, did you know eventually I want to start my own shop, and this is a stepping stone to get there?
I don't even think at that point I knew it. Okay. I think ultimately I had hoped that I would one day have the courage to leave, but we can go into that story later. But it was a lot of different things happening at once that I think caused me to leave. And I would like to think that eventually I would have gone, but you guys know it's so scary to leave benefits and security. And also I think when you put your name on something, it's also very, you're like, I'm here, and if I fail, everyone knows it's me that failed. And you can't hide behind a company.
Yeah, for me, I think I had the benefit of having a horrible job.
Me too.
Because it made that jump so much easier, because it was,
we both
could I replace the income? Could I replace all the benefits that I'm earning right now with, relatively little? But I almost felt like I got lucky because of the financial crisis. I was working in financial services.
Okay.
And everybody, there's how many people graduate in San Diego and Los Angeles any one year?
Yeah.
And it was just piling up. So financial services, people could abuse really smart staff and young go-getters. So I think it was lucky that 2008 occurred.
Sure.
And that I was in a position where
we met in college, but we both just had the benefit of having two psycho people that we worked for, bosses
That's
or what
great.
have you. But it was also, we both came together at the same time, like, I don't like what I'm doing, you don't like what you're doing. So it kind of forced us into that. But it sounded like, from a career standpoint, you were doing well.
I was so lucky. I mean, I definitely, when you work at agencies, you always think, oh, if I was the boss, I would do this a little differently, and you kind of tuck that away. And I think subconsciously,
don't give anybody any ideas.
I think subconsciously you think about that. But from what I hear from entrepreneurs, it's either I could do this better, or I'm just going to take a leap. So I think collectively, all three of us had a little of each.
Right.
And so it took you a long time to get to the point of saying, all right, I'm doing this on my own. Can you describe how that came to be?
Yeah, so I was at this amazing agency for a few years, and like I said, the focus was more on travel and hospitality, which was really interesting. But for me, I love a good product, and I love telling the story of a product. I love the discovery of a product. So for me, I kind of helped spearhead a lifestyle division within this agency. So it was very restaurant and hotel focused, and we started to work with products. And one of those clients at the time was this local cold pressed juice brand. These two beautiful young California kids came in, and they're like, we want to make this juice brand, and everyone was kind of like, oh, I don't know. And at that time, it had some silly name. Now we know it as Suja. But at that time, it was these, and there was really no one to work on the account because everyone was travel hospitality. So I was super excited, and I was like,
I'll take it.
Yeah, I was like, I'll take it. And I've always lived a very healthy lifestyle. And to me, this most closely resembled my work in New York, working with a product. It wasn't a beauty brand, but it was a better for you product. You felt better when you did it. So I really dove in headfirst into this client, and it just lit a fire in me. And I'm like, this is what I'm meant to do. And I love health and wellness, and you were starting to see at this time that your shopper at Whole Foods was not this crunchy granola person. Yes, it was expensive, and yes, there's a certain lifestyle, but people were willing to spend more for things that were good for them. And that's kind of when the light bulb started going on, and I was seeing what was happening in the grocery stores, and I was seeing what was happening with friends who, made $30,000 a year, but they still went to bar class, and there was something happening, and I
spending $7 on kombucha.
Exactly.
Well, just lifestyle spend is a lot higher.
Yeah.
And to me, so I really got into that. So started working with more products, and then ultimately, a few different things happened at once. I was approached by someone who's a dear friend now, and actually a business partner for a new business that I'm launching. And he said, listen, my business focuses a lot on CPG, is consumer packaged goods. We focus a lot on consumer packaged goods, but don't do PR. You're amazing in PR. What if we partner together? And that was the first time that I thought maybe I could leave and do something.
Right.
And I felt an intense sense of loyalty to the company and the team, but my wheels started to go. And I remember telling my dad, and he's like, this is crazy. Why would you rock the boat? I was never told, go take life by the, and not because he didn't believe in me, but just he was very protective, and he wanted me. So I was gonna go, and
my dad always said too, never leave a job until you have a job lined up. So.
Yeah, and I always left a job without having a job lined up, but I had faith, and so I was thinking about leaving, and as I was looking at the contract and figuring out kind of the share of the company, I thought, why don't I just do this all by myself? And I don't think, unless I was approached with that offer at that time in my life, I don't think at that time I would have left. And so I decided to leave.
I think a little bit different, because like I said, we had the the benefit of having bosses that we weren't too impressed with. I can do it myself, but him coming to you was like, wait a second, maybe I actually can do this on my own.
Yeah, and
that was a light bulb moment for you.
It was, and I was at this agency where 90% of people were focused on something else, and so I wasn't necessarily getting the recognition. I was kind of in a silo, so I'm like, I know I'm good at this, but this isn't what this agency does. And so, I was seeing the amazing results I was getting for Suja, and I was able to go back to all my old relationships in New York. And so at that point, then I can go down a really crazy story, but I was like, do I do this deal or do I not? And I actually, I was in London for the Victoria's Secret fashion show at this time with Suja actually, and I was really debating on what to do. And Damon John from Shark Tank was at the show, and I went up to him, of course, because again, I have no sense of shame, and I said, I watch your show every week. I'm in this situation where I don't know if I should do this deal. I think there's a lot of good things about it, but at the end of the day, I have this nagging suspicion that instead of sharing a company third, what if I just go do it by myself? And he was like, I really, really like you. Meet me in New York tomorrow at the top of the Empire State Building, because that's where his office was. And he's like, let's talk. And I was like, great, I'll be there. And of course, I had no ticket to New York.
But see, there's a trend here because it seems like even going back, like you went to E, like I want a job, I can do it. And then you get your first PR job, like I have no experience, but here's why you want me. And even going up to Damon John like that.
Yeah, and
that ability to just go up to people and say, here's the deal.
Well, I think for PR and sales, you know that you have to be incredibly aggressive and assertive and put yourself in a position. So somebody that can walk up confidently and ask someone like Damon John a question, for someone like Damon John, that's got to be very impressive.
Right.
And I think maybe it was, I was in this long ball gown, I sound like I'm 14, I look young. I mean, I don't necessarily have all like the balls in my court when it comes to things, and I actually think it's good. It's helped me because
you have the mindset like the alternative is he just says no and then whatever.
And so
at least
what?
you tried.
Right. I mean, I would not. So he says, meet me at the FUBU office tomorrow. And I was like, great, Mr. John, I'll be there.
That's fine.
And then I was like, what am I doing? So I booked
Wait, but you're in London.
I'm in London.
Meet me in New York tomorrow.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, I will be there, sir. So I flew to New York. I think he's like one of the top offices on the Empire State Building. I come in, I have only London Victoria's Secret, not like Victoria's Secret clothes, but like I'm sitting in the FUBU office with people walking in with grills, and I'm like sitting here, I have no I'm just totally like whatever. Mm-hmm. So he calls me into his office and he's like, let's talk. And so we start to talk and I tell him what I want to do and he tells me, don't take the deal. He's like, why would you take the deal? And then he started to say, maybe we should partner together, and he's like, what could we do for PR? And he's talking about how, Shark Tank needs different PR and how he has all these different licensing deals. And long story short, I think between a few things, and I also started dating my now my husband, but he was like, what are you doing? You're amazing. So I think between the confidence of my husband, the confidence of a shark on Shark Tank, and just having courage, I was like, I'm gonna just go out on my own. And I was so thankful to my future business partner for giving it to me and giving me the courage, but a lot of funny things happen.
But this Damon John story is amazing. So he's basically pitching you to work with him.
Yes.
This almost sounds like a screenplay that you're pitching us. It's like not realistic.
Yeah.
Like you weren't in London and met Shark Tank's Damon John and went to FUBU the next day. Like, come on, it's not realistic.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was pitching you a little bit to like, how can we work together? How did that end? How did you let that go and let him know?
So I had a series of meetings with he and his team.
Wow.
So over the course of 2 months, he had an amazing business partner who was kind of my point person. He came to San Diego because he has some business partners here. Another meeting, we met at like the Grand Del Mar, and the whole I think had cleared the whole restaurant, and I walked in, and he's an amazing guy, but he doesn't really make eye contact when he speaks.
That's weird, yeah.
So it's always very hard.
This is the business partner.
This is Damon John.
Oh, Damon.
So
okay.
this is always very hard. So he was amazing, but I think again, it probably wasn't the right fit for me, and I was like, do I want to? And there was never a real deal on the table. It was always just kind of talking about what would be. And I decided, I put together this deck on the agency, which I didn't even have a name. I didn't have anything. And I pitched it to him. And looking back now, it was horrific. But we met. And I mean, it was one of those things where I think what he was ultimately looking for and what I ultimately decided I had the courage to do didn't match up. But it was definitely through a few series of meetings.
Yeah, but you hear a lot from venture capitalists, like it's just a gut feeling, like this girl seems sharp, like I want to work with her, and that's pretty much what he based the initial meeting off of.
Even on Shark Tank, they say a lot of times, like, I don't care about this thing. I'm investing in you as a person.
Yeah.
Because they say a lot of
I also want 30% of every single company that you wind up doing, so it's a personal investment.
And
it sounds
what's
like that's
Mr. Wonderful, whatever he always says, like it concerns me that you're working on this part-time or what have you. That's his biggest thing.
If you're like all in. And I think
you have to be all in,
I think there's something in every, company I've pitched. I think there is a level when you are so dedicated and when you eat, breathe, and sleep it, you can pretty much overcome anything and you can pretty much do anything. And I think that sort of commitment is why entrepreneurs succeed or fail for lack of.
So what year are we in now? 2013, 14?
This is 2014.
Okay.
The fall of 2014.
So after the whole Shark Tank episode there that you almost go through, you pretty much go through, that's when you officially... I'm starting the LLC or what have you.
Yeah, so this was about October, and this is, and I had the support of my friend who initially came to me. I mean, he was amazing, and so much so that he actually let me use his office space to start. And
this Dylan?
This is Dylan,
okay.
yeah. I remember I interviewed someone to be an intern, and I'm like, this girl is really good. If I ever start my own thing, I'm going to hire this girl. So I went and I was like, no, we shouldn't hire her. She's not good. And I held on to her resume. And so the day I knew I was going to start the company, I called her and I said, I don't know if you remember me, but I interviewed you months ago and I held on to your resume. I'm starting an agency. It's going to be the fastest growing PR agency in the country. We're going to work with the coolest brands and I can pay you $26,000. And I said,
what a pitch.
Yeah, it's a great pitch.
And I said, but I promise you'll learn more than you can ever learn. We'll work hand in hand and I will not let it fail. I just will not let it fail. And she's like, I'm in. And I'm like, I'm sorry? Like, I could not believe it. And again, it was like someone taking a chance on me. And I was like, okay, I can do this. And I spent like 2 months with my husband going to the marina to find boat names that could inspire us for the company name and figuring it out, and came up with Covet, had an amazing lawyer, got incorporated, and just started.
Where does it start? Does it start in a bedroom? Does it start?
It started the person I was potentially going to partner with, he had an office and he had a small room, and he just was like, you can use it, stay here as long as you need.
So day one, you're able to still work with Souza, so that's your only, all your eggs are in one basket, at least in the beginning. But then immediately you're trying to obviously expand your portfolio.
Yeah, I think, Souza was, at this time, Forbes named it the second most promising company in the country. They had all eyes on them, and everyone was like,
so just that account, can you live and pay 2 salaries, do everything? Okay.
No,
okay.
I mean, you can,
by.
and I obviously did not take a paycheck for a very long time, and I had savings. But the good thing about PR is it is a word of mouth industry. So people are like, wow, who does Souja's PR? And then Souja's...
Call Sarah, you're going to love her. She's great.
And then Souja was amazing that they would talk about it. So, to this day, out of all the clients we've had in almost 3 years, I think we've only gone after one. Everything's been word of mouth. Wow. And so it's been pretty amazing.
And so when you made the leap and started this, were you married at the time?
No, so I was 4 months into dating my now husband.
Okay.
And he was an absolute rock. I mean, and he comes from a very entrepreneurial family. His dad is a serial entrepreneur. His dad has recreated himself 10 different times. And so I highly doubt that I'd be where I was today if it wasn't for his faith and confidence.
I'm always really interested in that because, we've had other partners, and I was in a relationship when we first started the company. And I really think that that's a major contributor, 25 to 50% of whether you're going to be successful, is if the other person is just like, do your thing, I've got your back, whatever.
100%.
Because it could be really difficult if not, because that's a lot to risk, especially if you're
100%.
trying to build something together. So
we still have napkins where he was helping me write a business plan and okay, worst case scenario, if you fail, you can always do this. And like I said, I didn't grow up in that sort of family. So having someone that could spitball with me and could do diagrams with me, and then just the faith, no matter what happens, we can rest on my income, you are fine. And to be 4 months into a relationship, that's not 4 years. So you get to know each other's strengths and weaknesses pretty quickly.
And so you have a partner at this point in time. Can you describe how that relationship came to be?
Well, I had no business partner.
No business partner.
No. So okay. I own the company 100%. Yeah, I don't have any partner.
So you started with Souza, your first client when you first started the company in that office. At what point did you start to get a couple more brands and start to scale where you're like, wow, this can actually be a profitable company where I can hire more people and start to grow?
Sure. So I think our second client was completely not what we did, but I needed to pay my employee, so we took it on. It was an app. And I know nothing. I have 2 apps on my phone, and I was like, oh, absolutely, PR is PR. And we took them on, and I'm like, what am I going to do? I know nothing about this. But 2 months later, they had a full page in Entrepreneur, and I was like, okay, I can just talk my way into most of these things. So but then we had this, and then one of our clients to this day, The Honest Kitchen, it's a human grade pet food brand. They knew the folks at Souza. In the CPG world, there's 5 or 6 big investors. It's a very tight knit community. Yeah. So I remember going in to pitch The Honest Kitchen, and at this point, I don't think I've ever pet a dog because I'm so allergic to animals. I now have a Labradoodle puppy that I'm not allergic to, but I was that weird person that if a dog came by, I'd run, and I come in, I'm like, I just love animals, and I'm like, and I knew nothing about pet food. I knew nothing about it, but I was like, I promise, I'm so hungry, I will work so hard, and I'm down the street, and we can talk about trends in food and as they relate to pets. And they took a huge chance on me, and they're still a client today. So it took a few kind of clients to take a chance on me.
But it seems that you have a natural, people trust you. It seems like when you walk into these places and you're like, I promise, I got your back, I'm going to do this. And they're like, All right, let's give her a shot.
Well, and I think, it
Seems
translates so well. It seems to me like you're a salesperson by nature.
That's what PR is. I mean,
And
it is
it really
sales.
seems like if you can sell that person, they feel like, well, if they're doing this to any of the magazines or the distributors that we're trying to get in,
Yeah.
then
That's a big part of
then
it.
it's going to be successful. So
Yeah, I think it is, and I think I will never allow failure to happen in anything I do in life. Like it's absolutely a zero option, and I think people are attracted to that. I think people are attracted to confidence and to knowing that you'll stop at nothing to let them succeed, and I think it's an attractive quality for entrepreneurs.
How structured and how planned was this new company when you started? Did you have a business plan? Did you say these are the numbers I'm trying to hit for the year, or was it just let's go?
Still don't really have one of those. I've never had a business plan.
That's the one thing I don't know, because I know you talk at USD to students, and that's what I always get asked. Is like, how'd your original business plan look? I'm like, it wasn't really.
And I'm like,
you didn't have a business plan.
If you go
We didn't have a
to
business
it's
model.
make money so I can pay my rent. And
and it's learn on the job
Yeah.
and figure out. My operations manager and we have this huge chart of things we'll never do again, and it's like that's my business plan of things that like mistakes I've made, and I've made plenty, and so. No business plan. My dad lent me $20,000, and he definitely thought he would never see it again. And when I paid him back, I did $20,000 and $1 for interest. But I had that because that's what I lived on, and I was very lucky in that my first few hires were absolutely insanely amazing, creative and dedicated. I had an intern who's now someone very important on the team. She built our website. She was 22, and I could not have done that. I was very blessed that I had very amazing strategic people that had strengths that I didn't have.
I feel like at least we did. You almost had to have that blind faith early on, because I remember telling my dad too, like, it's gonna take us like 20 or 30 days and we'll be making this.
Yeah.
And that. He's all, give yourself 6 months.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, that's what I'm telling you.
The initial thought of us was a total pipe dream.
Yeah.
We thought like, well, this is how much money we can get per month by clients. We'll sell 10 of them.
Yeah.
Me and you are just making all this money, and then we're just cruising, and then it's just off to the races.
Yeah.
Then 2 months in,
It's almost good though, I think, to think that.
I think it's important. You have to be naive or maybe even like ignorant in a little bit of the sense, because if you really start looking at business plans, then you'll start to see like, man, in order to make just enough money to feed myself.
And he went from financial services to like, essentially we were selling sports content.
Yeah.
So it's kind of different for him. I never asked you this question, but I'll ask you now. If you would have saw the realistic timeline, it's going to take 7 months before we make whatever, you may have been like, I don't know if I can do it right.
I don't think so. I think at
we were
that
so
point,
blind in our faith.
at that point, I was ready to go back to like bussing tables at night just to feed myself, because I felt really confident that I'm like, well, it's not going to fail long term. It's just a matter of how much time is it going to take to replace the income so that I can just feed myself.
But to your point, we started selling essentially blogs, original content. That was our original business plan. And just like you, they say, yeah, do you guys do infographics though? We're like, sure.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
And then him and I are opening up Photoshop on YouTube. Like, how do you do an infographic?
That's
how you have to do it.
There's a quote from Richard Branson. It's like, if someone gives you an amazing opportunity, say yes and figure out how to do it later.
And
I think I've lived my whole life by just being, oh, absolutely.
What's it? Your favorite's like jump off a cliff and build a plane on the way down type deal.
Yeah. Well, and what's really important from our perspective, I think, is that if we had been funded well, we would have made so many more mistakes and we would have lost every penny. But because we needed profit immediately, we had to drill down to what are you willing to pay us to do today so that we can get a check in the mail and let's go. So we found what was profitable way faster than we would have if we had 50 grand a piece from our parents and a longer runway. We would have burned all the way through it and then had to figure out what was profitable.
I talked to a lot of different entrepreneurs and people who are funded, whether, millions or whatnot. And I was offered funding from like strategic people who believed in me. And I'm so glad that, one, I didn't have those ties and that pressure, but two, there was just no option of failure for me. And so you had to just be you got to be such a hustler. And I'm hoping I would have been as successful, but I think there's something to be said when the only option is you.
Yeah. And I think as a second company, if David and I were like, hey, we've got this great concept, we want to go out there. Now I feel confident that with funding, I understand enough to put it together.
Yes.
But in the
You have to
beginning
make a bunch of
stages, I really
mistakes.
do. I think it would have been
Yep.
an additional added stress because just that needing to pay someone back. I took $5,000 from my dad, and you took a
Yeah.
little bit of money, and both of us
pay
were
rent.
stressed out.
Yeah.
And like it was this pit in my stomach until I sent that check.
Totally.
Yeah.
And to your point, I am launching a new agency with the person who initially approached me to launch the first agency, and we are doing funding. We're doing a small round of 500,000, but it is, I think, like a fail-proof investment for these people because now we truly
You have the
know
track
what works
record.
and what doesn't work. And
Right.
the operational know-it-all of running a business and then taking that to a second business. I mean, there's 30 million things that I would not have done. I mean, I was doing payroll and HR for the first year, and
Yeah.
every week I was like, oh my God, please don't let me mess up this person's payment. I would have outsourced that from day one so I
Yeah.
could focus on the business. But there's things you don't know until you do it. So
And to our point, we probably would have hired a designer for 60 grand right out of the, we have to have a designer.
Yeah.
There's no way we can do all this,
Yeah, I mean, we basically offered somebody or thought that somebody was going to be the first employee, and we gave them 2 or 3 projects and realized they were a problem
yeah.
Yeah.
in the very early stages. But one thing I want to go back to is you said that you got lucky almost in that the first 2 hires were incredible.
Yeah.
In hindsight, was there something specifically that you were looking for? Was it luck, or did you have great intuition?
I'm so drawn to hustlers, and I'm so drawn to people that are like, oh, we'll get it done, and if we don't know, we'll figure it out. And both of these 2 girls were that. And one started as an employee, and the other started as an intern, and quickly became an employee. And 21, I think when 21 and like 23. And there was something about their presence, there was something about their eye contact, there was something about their confidence that I was so drawn to. And I tell my team all the time, like a huge part of success is faking it till you're making it, and just letting people know you're confident and then going into your room and crying and being like, how I'm going to do this, but on the outside. And so I think when I look at like the most successful hires, it's been people that just have that confidence.
So what is the favorite part of the business that you're currently in?
That's a good question. I think it's 2 things. When I started Covet, I had 2 very specific goals. The first goal was to create an amazing culture of collaboration and of figuring out a different way to do things, not doing PR the same way everyone's been doing PR, having a lot of fun, thinking outside of the box, and having people really come every day and be super pumped to be there. And the second was being able to choose our clients. Most PR agencies don't get to choose. They have payroll. They know that they have to, in order to hire this next person, they have to take on these 3 brands, and they may be really shitty brands that no one believes in. And to this day, I've never said yes to a client that I wasn't super excited about. And we've honestly said no more than we've said yes. And a lot of people are like, that's not that smart, and what happens if your hugest client leaves? But that's worked for me, and I think a big reason why that's worked is because the team is super excited. No one's working on a lame client. So for us, my 2 favorite things are absolutely the people I work with and the
And you
clients.
guys are 100% female at the PR agency?
We just hired our first guy.
Nice.
Yeah, Dimitri. He's great.
Very cool.
He started as an intern, and we're certainly not biased. It's just PR tends to be a more
ours
female.
is opposite because starting in sports, obviously it's a bunch of, every time you put
Yeah.
a job interview out or application, 94 of the 100 are men, and we had to go through the same deal. Like we need to get some, females in here, and I'm sure you probably had that same.
Yeah, you do
need some
want
males.
other perspectives. I mean,
It's
especially in
huge.
PR, when we're pitching a coffee or a protein bar, like we can think what other people would think, but it's also just great to have
It's huge.
the opinion of someone else.
Yeah. So I find that really interesting when you're talking about choosing your clients. Now, the reason why people are probably saying, hey, that's not so smart is because you're risking growth and top line revenue. How do you balance, where you want to get and growing the company versus, because I think we're having that conversation on a regular basis right now.
And I think that's one of the
do we
hardest
go in and
things.
just slam it and get everybody in here and get top line growth?
Yeah.
Or do we remain selective at the risk of maybe having peaks and valleys and really sign people that we're fascinated with and excited to work with? How do you balance that?
And I think that's one of the biggest struggles of a company is scaling it and knowing when to overstaff, when to whatnot. And we have been very lucky that since we've started, we've always had a waiting list of clients. And I am very adamant of not taking on the work until we have the team, and not only the people and warm bodies, but the right team.
But that builds that luxury brand too. Like
yeah,
people
and I
wanna
think,
be,
and some people are like, are you just saying this? You really have a 2-month waiting list? I'm like, we really do. And I'm like, could I take you on now and do good work? Yes. Is it the best work that I know our agency can do? And 9 times out of 10 they wait. And it's not 6 months, but for the first time in the business, these last 2 months, I've done what I've never done, which is I've hired before we've had the business. And I've needed to do that for a few reasons. One, you're only going to be like the hot thing on the block for a while. And we've been very lucky that, we are the fastest growing agency in what we do in the country. But I know someone else is sitting in their basement right now and working on how to take us over. And so I'm very aware that we can't always have the luxury of having a waiting list where people will wait. And two, I'm having a baby in a few months. And so I also have to think, how can I, ensure that the agency is going to be really well equipped when I'm not there for the day to day. And part of that is investing in really amazing senior talent, maybe a little prematurely before you have them to have a full account load.
So I asked you your favorite part of the business, and I think I may know your least favorite. Because I do want to talk about just how the ever-changing industry and always having to groove. But what is your least favorite part about?
I think I think the hardest thing is having clients that don't understand PR. And I now know what questions to ask in new business calls to weed out the people. If you're spending your last time on PR, you're not right for us, because anyone who's spending their last time on anything, the expectations.
They're going to nitpick every single move.
Their expectations are going to be crazy. If you don't understand that PR is a cycle, it's not advertising. I can't tell you this is what the write-up's going to look like and this is what issue it's going to be in. So I think I've had to.
And it's a long-term game. You can't just snap your fingers over 2 weeks and good PR.
Exactly. And so for me, the hardest part is dealing with unrealistic expectations. And I think dealing with, humanity in the sense, whether that's, employees that are, I've had to let go of some employees for unfortunate reasons. And, I care so much and everyone's like, you should care a little less. And I can't care less. And so for me, I take everything home and I'm not able to clock in and clock out. And, we close the office between Christmas and New Year's. I'm working between Christmas. There's no break, which is, I never complain because I hate when people have a great life and they complain. But there is something to be said for not being able to turn off. And I think that's challenging.
Well, that's been brought up. Sorry, go ahead.
So in our industry, we've faced a lot of the same things, because when we're working with networks and teams, it's very hard to translate what we're doing directly to sales.
Yeah.
And it's also difficult to say hey, we know over the course of a year, here's what we're going to be able to provide 100%. Because it's, we can't guarantee those things because it's not ad dollars. We can't guarantee views. How do you set and manage expectations for your clientele?
My favorite question I get is, how many press placements do you guarantee in the first year, and how is that going to affect our sales? And I said, you're talking to the wrong specialist right now. I said, we can guarantee best practices. And PR...
So between 5 and 100.
Yeah. And PR is an industry where they kind of have antiquated ways of measurement. So we use circulation, ad value, and impressions. So if you get 2 pages in the Wall Street Journal, we say if you were to take a 2-page ad out, it would cost you this. So there's your ad value. We also use impressions. So if you're in People magazine, you take that circulation and you multiply it by 3. And that means someone read it, someone told their neighbor about it, and that neighbor told their neighbor about it. The problem is, if those 2 neighbors go to Whole Foods to buy the product, we have no idea it's because they read it in People magazine. So one of the things that I'm constantly fighting is, what's the ROI and how do you, and I don't have a good answer. I'm like, we're in the business of brand awareness, and in a perfect world, yes, I like to be able to say these 13 initiatives led to, 20 times X in sales, but it's impossible.
And we do the same thing with, our TV network clients. We'll do an awards show and we'll have a great Instagram campaign or a social media lead up. But if you look on your Instagram feed one day during lunch, I'm going to watch the SAG Awards tonight, and you flip it on 2 hours later,
there's no correlation.
Yeah. And do you find that now that we're in a little more of a data-driven society where Facebook, you can very directly see, and you're part of a large pie, I'm assuming, with most of these companies, because they will have an advertising agency and creative. So question one is, have you seen that become more difficult to prove your worth now that there's more data? And secondly, when you're part of the larger pie, is there ever tension between all the parties competing for their value?
I think in terms of the first question, yes and no. There's now ways you can track back on links, and there's, you can embed things. There's some analytical ways to do it, but that's not all we focus on. So in some ways it helps, in some ways it doesn't. And in terms of being part of the bigger pie, we pride ourselves on having really good relationships with different agency partners. And so, we'll talk to their advertising agency, or we'll talk to their digital marketing agency and saying, what testing are you using on Facebook? What words are people clicking on? How does it resonate? I think it does make it harder, though, to earn that success and say it was because of us, because now there's so many players in the game.
How big a part of your industry is the reporting? Is it a monthly thing, a quarterly thing? Here's what we did, here's the placement we got, and is that constant I guess, a discussion where they're like, yeah, we just didn't feel like you guys did. That type
so
of thing.
we, one of the things that I'm really proud of what we do at Covet, because PR is so gray, we try to give as many indications throughout our partnership of our success and our work, and we're super, super transparent. So we do send monthly press updates, which is all the press that's hit with all the qualifications. As press literally hits, we send it over. We have weekly calls, we have status grids where we keep track of every single media conversation. But at the end of the day, you can have all of these and a client can still be like, yeah, but my sales aren't going up. And it's like, but we've done our part of the job, and I think that's becoming increasingly more difficult, especially with the rise of the influencer and the rise of different technologies. I have to prove our value now more today than I've ever had to do before.
So it sounds like, and we've ran into this too, you see this problem where it's frustrating that people are not understanding your value and there's no exact science to prove it. So it sounds like that kind of took you into the new business venture with the influencers and trying to go that route.
Absolutely. So Dylan Whitman, who is the co-founder and CEO of BVXL, which is a digital marketing agency, they're the #1 partner of Shopify. They have offices all over the world. We are partnering together to launch Famously, which should hopefully launch next month. And the concept of it is it's a social experience agency. And there's certain things neither of our companies do that every single client asks for, where we're just, not only are we leaving business on the table, but we have these clients saying, no one is doing this well, can you help us? And that's really targeted influencer marketing, specifically in the retail and consumer packaged goods space, and then organic social media. And there's a lot of barriers to entry right now with good social media, and I think the biggest thing is quality content.
Yep.
So Famously we'll have a full creative team, similar to what you guys have, a full studio to create really compelling content, as well as an influencer management side. And influencer management is something we're doing now. Influencers are the new celebrities.
I taught her about Salt Bay. I taught her about Cash Me Outside.
Oh my gosh, the Dr. Phil girl?
Yeah. And I told her about Cash Me Outside.
9 million on Insta, printing money.
I can't believe that.
Well, and we saw something recently. Kendall Jenner is charging $1.3 million per Instagram post for brands. So it's a new way to...
But I think the thought of influencers still to people sounds like, oh, it's just like influencers on social, but I mean, Howard Stern is an influencer because he's got audience, because he's got reach. Yeah. So if you've got that same reach on other platforms and you can very clearly target people, it's like why would those CPMs be any different than it would be elsewhere for people who are celebrities? And
from a PR perspective, magazines are folding every day. Editors are becoming influencers. Like for any brand to be relevant, you have to have an influencer strategy. And now it's the focus on the micro influencer, and it's much more effective to spend way less money than a Jenner, Kardashian for people that have high engagement, and and
they trust them more. The micro influencer.
But that world, talk about something that you have to keep up with every week. That world, every week there's something new, and we have an internal team that does some influencer management, but this new agency will focus much more on that.
Well, on the digital marketing side. To share a cry together, it's in terms of always having to change your business model. It's like, do you guys do Facebook Live? Like, yeah, I guess we do. So we have to buy all this equipment and we figure it out. I think it keeps it fun to constantly stay up on stuff, but you constantly have to change your business model, and it's hard to scale too, because if all of a sudden Musical.ly starts to be the #1 app in the world, then you have to have maybe a completely different staff or studio setup or what have you.
Yeah.
And so with the new endeavor that you're going at, why did you decide to make this a completely new company rather than incorporating it as a new department in your existing business?
I think for a few reasons. One, it was a distraction to me. I was initially going to launch a big influencer division, and while influencer and PR go hand in hand, there is a church and state element. There's a different way of monetizing it. There's a different way of working on it. So one, it was a distraction. Two, I think, when you look at potentially selling the business one day, agencies right now, and I think, people look to buy, they're really looking for specialties and very niche. And so for me, we, I think, are the best in the country when it comes to traditional PR. What's going to be the next best when it comes to social experience? And I think I'm someone who doesn't try to be good at everything. I want to have one thing that I'm really, really good at. So for me, it was a combination of those two things.
And what was the need for the original funding? Was it to get somebody that can run the company and you don't have to have that startup vibe? Or was it...
Yeah, so for us, I think we're going to be profitable pretty quickly, just with the deal flow of the two agencies and our reputations and
Because people are already waving their hands saying we want this.
Yeah, we already have a list of clients. For us, obviously, my business and my baby, until this baby, is Covet. And so for me, it's not realistic to think I'm going to be there every single day. So a big need of the capital out of the gate was to find that general manager, that managing director who would demand a pretty high salary because they come with a lot of experience, and to really kind of give he or her the reins to do it, and to have a little runway. So we can make a few mistakes since it is a little different, and feel okay about it. But we went back and forth. Do we need funding? We have people who very strongly recommend against not.
Yeah.
But the second part was having very strategic advisors and investors. So people that are the best of the best in this industry and can kind of be our advocates.
And so you mentioned it earlier when, you thought about starting a company, period. It was like, you're going to put your name on this place.
Yeah.
And so everything that happens is a direct, relation to you and what you're bringing to the table. Is it just the timeline that you've been in business that makes you feel that you're at a point where you can say, I'm going to set something up to succeed, I'm going to manage it and oversee it, but I'm going to let it go on its own a little bit?
Yeah, it's definitely, for me, who's a total type A control freak, this has been an experience in patience and letting go a little bit. And having a business partner is a totally new experience. When you own your company 100%, I don't have to answer to anybody. I don't have anyone's money on the line. I don't have a board. So it's definitely been a learning experience. But I think for me, I think it's going to be more successful if I'm not trying to do both, and if I can take my key learnings. And this company is going to be intrinsically connected to Covet. We're going to have someone whose key job is to be the liaison between existing clients. So it's going to be in its own office, to have its own culture, but it's going to be very connected without me having the responsibility, or my business partner, of having to be there 9 to 6 every day.
But it sounds like this new company is a lot more structured, has a business plan, has a goal.
Yeah, if you look at kind of our plan for this versus the lack of plan that I still have for Covet, it's like night and day.
That's fine. So let's talk about just the entrepreneurship. So we all joined a local chapter here, an entrepreneur organization. That's how we met. But you talk about how you never turn off. And one thing that's been brought up with multiple guests so far is entrepreneurial guilt. And you either, if you're having fun with the family or what have you, you feel like you're not putting enough in the business, or vice versa. So how do you deal with that, especially being...
I think my answer now and my answer in 4 months is going to be very different once I have my little girl. But I mean, I think for me, it has been a constant lesson that I've had to reteach myself. It's not natural for me to turn off. It's not natural for me to be in the moment. My mind is...
Or let go and trust other people to handle something for you.
100%. I think when it's your company and you feel like you have so much on the line, it can absolutely consume you. And I met my husband when I started the agency. Since then, we've gotten married, we've traveled. If I look at my first 2 vacations versus our honeymoon, it's night and day. I made myself turn off on the honeymoon. I knew enough to know that the company wasn't going to burn down, and that I could never get this time back. But it is a constant proactive choice every day to kind of turn off, and it's hard. I'm assuming it will get easier, but it is hard. And I think, when you have friends that work for different people and they complain, it's like, yeah, but theoretically you can turn off. Like I feel like I can't turn off. Like if someone needs me, or a client, at the end of the day, it's ultimately always my responsibility. It's not the team.
How do you instill that in your staff? Because when you're walking away, we've had the benefit of, hey, he's got a family vacation. Hey, I've got my honeymoon. I know that I can trust David and he can trust me, that we'll have a knot in our stomach if there's anything wrong, and we'll fix it. With being solo, like how did you instill that into somebody to just say, I need to leave, and you have to do it?
It's kind of a running joke that I've only taken 1 vacation in 3 years where there hasn't been a crisis, where I've had to like get on the phone, spend 6 hours. I mean, the short of it is I don't yet have that 100% person who 100% knows everything.
And you hear that a lot. Like Mark Cuban said he didn't take a vacation for the first 7 years. And talking to Chris Lynch too, he said like the first 3 or 4 years, like you're not gonna have this lavish lifestyle.
It was a waste to even go. Like we went to Costa Rica, and I was in the hotel room for 4 days, with someone that I was gonna have to let go, and a client. So the good thing is that I have a team that is so dedicated and so passionate that they know how important it is that when I'm out to like keep it up, that I know they won't let it fail. And there's going to be, there's going to always be product recalls and crazy clients and things like that. And there has to be an element of knowing that you're not always going to be there.
We finally had that conversation with each other. We both came to the same conclusion. This is like 6 months ago. But we're like, if we don't entrust somebody to handle this account and we lose the account, we lose the account. At a certain point, you can only scale so big
And
if you're the only people that are doing it.
That was a hard lesson to learn, that you're not going to please everybody all the time, and you can't.
And if they screw it up and they're terrible, well, we made a bad hire and we made a
Exactly.
bad scale decision. But at a certain point, you have to be like, I trust you.
Yeah.
Go
Right.
forward.
Well, and there's only one of you, there's only two of us. So if we have two projects going on in LA and New York,
we're maxed out.
and then we have an opportunity to do a third, that's it.
Yeah.
We can't do it because both of us have to be there.
Yeah.
And I think the first time letting somebody go and just being like,
hopefully it works.
I was forced very early on, due to the amount of business that wanted to work with us, that I had to let it go. And to this day, I think that was one of the best lessons. And I took 22-year-olds to pitch Joy Bauer of the Today Show on their third week of the job. And I was just like, please don't mess up. And you know what? No one really messed up. Were there things I would have done differently? Yes. But I think just putting people in the situations and giving them the opportunity versus like whiteboarding it for 6 months and how would you do it? That's the best way.
And the good news is they may
learn.
surprise you and may do it way better than you would have done it or what have you.
I've always been pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
I've never been let down by someone that I put in a position before they were ready.
and I think what's funny about that is I've never heard anybody talk about like, well, here was our planned thing to hand over. It was always like, it has to happen
Shit
now
happens.
because we have too many clients, or I have to leave, and somebody has to do this. And then
because if not, it'd be an 18-month like.
it would just
step
never, it would
plan,
never happen. There would
A
always be
gradual
oversight.
climb,
But it's like it almost has to come to that point where you have to let it go, and then it happens, and then at the end of it, you're like, okay, client was happy, nobody died, everybody's okay.
And those first few things of seeing that it works out, it lets you for the next time feel like you can take a little.
And I think for us too, it was nice to finally hear like, so-and-so is so amazing, or oh my God, I love so-and-so so much. And also it tells you you're doing a great job as far as leadership and preparing them for success.
And I'll give a little bit of credit actually to EO, because I'm always on, I always have my phone, and I'm not like working all the time, but if something comes up, I'm there. And the first forum, I think,
turn your phone
it was turn your phone off for like 6 hours. And it was right in the middle of something that was
like,
really important to me. And I just had to say, to one of the employees, like, you need to manage this project. And I turned my phone on at the end of the night, and it was like,
It was managed.
okay, it's fine. So for me, that was this tremendous weight off my
letting
shoulders.
go for entrepreneurs is one of the hardest things. We got to where we got to because we have a specific way of doing things, but we'll never scale unless you let go.
And we always felt like we had to answer emails within 30 seconds for some stupid reason. And then when you don't, it's like, oh, we could have got to that next tomorrow morning. I know, me too.
My husband's father's an entrepreneur. He's like, you should just have a rule that within 24 hours they'll get back. And I started laughing. I was like, 24 hours? I was like, are you crazy?
Yeah.
And I realized a few months ago that one of the things that I did wrong was I have created this huge sense of urgency in the agency, where if you don't get back right away, and that has created a lot of nervous Nancy's and this fear that if you don't, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like there should be an understanding that people will get back to you the next day, but I as a leader do not set a good example.
But even with your clients, so we've pitched in the past too, like, we're around 24/7. If you ever need anything, they're like, oh, great. So then if you're not around 24/7, they're like, you're screwed.
100%. You've kind of made your bed.
You set that precedent. As an entrepreneur, what's the best piece of advice you ever received? Maybe it was going through one of those trying times, but.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of great mentors in San Diego. I'm very lucky, and I think there hasn't been one piece of advice that was like, oh, but there was a lot of nuggets. And I think one of them is you're not going to make everyone happy, and your people are going to leave for things that are completely out of your control.
Employees leaving or clients? Both, probably.
Mostly clients.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the tough things in PR is that people always want the new shiny thing. And so if someone comes in, it's like, there's things that you can't compete with sometimes, and you have to not try to just launch new services and do this to be competitive. And I think, really focusing on your core and knowing things are out of your control.
How does it usually work? Do you sign like minimum year contracts? And
6 months is the lowest we sign.
And then
most are
at
years.
any time, are they allowed to do an agency review?
It's a 90-day out clause in terms of that. And we really pride ourselves, like within the first month of a new client, I'll personally check in and I'll say, how are things going? And, when I started the agency, I was on every call, and now I have to focus more on the business than being in the business, but I'm still very, very hyper aware of making sure everyone's happy. And most of the time they are, and I find when they're not, it has little to do with us and more to do with their business.
Internal budgets or what's going on sales-wise.
What's one of the biggest mistakes that you've made since you've been an entrepreneur?
Oh gosh. I think I don't necessarily...
Not doing PR for FUBU, that was the biggest
mistake. I don't necessarily think it's a mistake, but something that I'm realizing and that I'm doing is that bringing people in with different agency experience is really good. A lot of our staff, most of our staff started with me. And while that's great,
homegrown.
Yeah, and of course it's like, well, it's Sarah's way, this is the best way, but not necessarily. And so I think we've made a big effort in the last 6 months to recruit people from New York, from big agencies, from small agencies, to just get key learnings and different perspectives. And I think in the beginning, I was so focused on like mentoring and growing the staff from the beginning and having them grow, which I still am. But I do think having different perspectives is really, really helpful and something we're working on now.
Really good. Was there a book that you would recommend to other entrepreneurs? We have a few here that we have not read all. But
I've read Tools of Titans, which is good. I'm reading 2 books right now that are really interesting. One is The Fourth Turning, which is in short, basically, everyone talks about how to deal with millennials. And I think for the most part, millennials are amazing. I think their work ethic is great. I think, yes, there's sometimes a sense they grew up where they got like a trophy for showing up and you have to constantly, reward and whatnot. But this book is basically about how throughout history, I don't know if it's every fourth turning of a time, you have this kind of reemergence of this millennial attitude and how to deal with it and why people have felt like that. And then I'm finishing Leaders Eat Last, which is basically a book on how to have effective leadership. And then another book I'm reading right now is Conscious Leadership, there wasn't one book that was like, this is the light bulb. I take a little things from each book that's been really helpful.
And from a culture standpoint, what are some of the things that you've, maybe early on you didn't do, but now you do and you think is super important to keep people feeling impactful and happy?
I think taking a second to like reward people. I always have tried to do that, but not necessarily in a public way. So now we do these things called Wednesday Weeklies where everyone gathers in the conference room. And it's 10 to 15 minutes of just shout out. So everyone from the interns to me said this person did something really well. And I think public acknowledgement is really important. And I think we're all going a million miles per hour.
Yeah.
So I think that's really good.
And we always talk about entrepreneurs never celebrate their wins. So it's nice to every week we're going to celebrate a couple wins.
Absolutely. And we do, biannual retreats where we get out of the office for a few days and we do things. We have a mind, body, spirits program where once a month we do something either for mind, body, or spirit, sometimes literally spirits at the bar. But we're always trying to get out of our heads a little bit and connect outside of the office. We do walking talks now, so instead of just meeting in the conference room.
That's a good idea.
People will not leave their desk unless you tell them to leave their desk. And you find when they do leave their desk,
and you guys are open office environment kind of as well,
yeah,
right?
we have a few private offices.
That has its issues as well, trying to get people.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I really agree with you. I think we've hired mostly millennials here in the office, and I find that most of the...
we are millennials.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find myself on the top end of it. I identify as Gen X, I think.
Yeah.
But the young people that we've hired, what's popular in the narrative about millennials, in my opinion, doesn't ring true for the people that we've hired. I've been incredibly impressed with everybody, and the youngest people that are in this office have some of the more senior roles. But I do think that there are some challenges in managing people no matter what the age. So what are some of the most difficult things about managing people that you've encountered?
Yeah, and I think that's something most recently that has been more difficult. And I think the people that are there day one, and now there's all these new people, there's always a sense of, and understandably so, and it's not necessarily entitlement, but it's like, if someone comes in that's more senior, that hasn't, earned their mark necessarily at our company, but at other companies, there's always, I think people are so committed that there's sometimes a sense of, well, why aren't I there? What should I be doing? And I actually appreciate that. I think it shows. I try to look at the positive side of that. I think
it means they want to be a part of the company. Yeah.
I think with millennials, they grew up, and I guess, I'm 34, but I guess theoretically I'm at the end of the millennial, but there's this flexible culture. So there's been a lot of requests, well, can we work 8 to 5, or can we have remote work days? And to me, it's like Mandarin. I'm like, but this is when we work, and this is where the team is. But what I've realized is that they have such great, strong work ethic that sometimes they do work better in a park for one day a month. Yeah. So trying to, I think, be open to things that at first glance, I'm like, well, I never had that, or that was never an option, but knowing that it is a little bit different now.
I think what we've explored too is well, tell me how it works. I don't want to have to sit here and figure out your schedule.
Yeah.
Tell me how it's going to help me and how productive you're going to be, and we'll see how it goes. That's been helpful. Pitch me on the idea.
I'm definitely I definitely have created a my door is always open policy, and it's definitely been used. Lots of requests every week.
That's
and
good though. The alternative is awful.
Most of the time I do, but there's sometimes I want to be like, if it's like when I was your age, I walked to the snow. But there is something to be said, like, oh my God, you guys have it so good. But I'm proud that I can give a culture that's good.
And so when you're looking to hire, can you describe what the perfect employee looks like to you?
I think the first thing, like I said, is confidence and hustler. And if I don't know how to figure out, I'll figure it out. I think, in PR, it's relationships. So coming with a good Rolodex of contacts. I think having an innate understanding of this evolving world we're in right now as it relates to technology and social media and influencers, and being progressive and knowing what's next. I think obviously experience in the consumer packaged goods. It's somewhat, you wouldn't go to a podiatrist if you had cancer. So if you're coming to work at Covet and you've been doing PR for medical sales, we're not the right fit. So having a very specific niche. And positivity, we really have an environment that I'm really proud of, and negative energy is just a game changer.
Especially in open office environments.
Yeah, especially with 20 women and one guy.
So what's the end goal? Let's fast forward, let's say 5 years, maybe even 10 years down the road. Do you have kind of that light at the tunnel that you're trying to reach, or what's the...
Yeah, I mean, people are like, would you sell, and what would it, a lot of people have our eyes on the agency. I want to work till the day I die. I mean, I truly am so passionate about what I do. So never say never, but I hope Covet's around in 10 years. I hope the team that is here now are running the agency. I'm having a baby in a few months. I expect my role is going to change a little bit, and that I'm not going to be there 9 to 6 every day and working at night. So I think Covet's still being there and priding ourselves on adapting with the times.
Do you think a scale to like an LA office, San Diego office, New York office?
Yeah, we're opening up a New York office this fall.
Very cool.
Not necessarily because we need it, but if one more person says, how are you a PR firm in San Diego? It's like, how are you a media agency and you're not in New York or LA? And I'm like, because it's 2017.
I know it.
And half of our team came from New York, but just to not have to answer that anymore,
I think
we're doing
that tide is going to change now, because I think, Detroit and San
like
Diego and Chicago, people can work from anywhere now.
Yeah. And I'm like, do you know how much happier my employees are in San Diego than New York?
Yeah, but people feel like the 5-hour flight is like, well, you would never fly out here for that. Like, yeah, we will. It's not that big a deal.
My first 2 years, I was in New York. I'm not even exaggerating, every 2 or 3 weeks. And I had to do that. But so I think, yes, Covet LA, Covet New York, I think that will very much be, and I always want to focus on products. I mean, I know this will live in history, and so who knows, maybe in 10 years I'm not, but products to me is something I always want to have a super specific
Anybody specific, you mentioned Richard Branson, but anybody specifically that you've looked up to or has inspired you throughout this whole journey so far?
I have a great mentor in James Brennan. He's a very successful local business guy who was co-founder of Suja, co-founder of Kopari, which is an amazing coconut oil beauty brand. EO has been great, just talking to people who actually don't know and are in totally different fields but have the same issues. My husband has been amazing. My business partner has been great. I look for mentors everywhere I go.
Yeah, we just talked to somebody that said if you don't have a mentor, you're at a strategic disadvantage, which I love that word. It's like so true. You
don't know what you don't know.
And we just brought on a business coach and looking at more mentorship programs and things like that, because I can, talk to somebody that sold $1 billion company. They could probably provide some.
I think so. I think they have some intel for you.
Little intel.
And what does it mean to you to be an entrepreneur?
It means that I get to create a company that carries out a vision of how I think the best way to do PR is, and that I can be nimble, that I can constantly evolve and recreate, and that I don't have to ask anyone for approval or for forgiveness.
I think I mentioned this to you before, but there's so much stuff online about work-life balance and what that means and kind of the recipe. How have you dealt with that? I mean, you talked a little bit about you're never off, but what is your philosophy on work-life balance, if there is such a thing?
Sure. I mean, I think it's really important to, I work out 3 or 4 days a week, and there was a time where I was just like, I can't work out anymore, and I found that I was really anxious, and I'm like, why am I anxious? And I'm like, because I haven't sweat in 3, so making sure that I stay, I love to read, and while I love entrepreneur books, like sometimes to just read some crazy, like historical fiction book, and I think remaining true to the things that make you happy, which is spending time with family, friends, travel. We got a puppy the day we found out we were pregnant, 2 hours after we found out we were pregnant. And even having a puppy, coming home and being like, I can't get right on my computer. I have to take him for a walk. I have to rub his belly. and petting a puppy. I mean, just realizing there's way more to life than.
Well, even
than
I'm
work.
like in an adult basketball league weekly, and even that like hour a week to know I can't check my phone, I can't be on the laptop, like just some type of solace that you can
Absolutely.
You can have. Some rapid fire questions for you here towards the end. So what's your morning routine like? I know that's a famous question everybody gets asked, but do you have one, or is it kind of ever changing?
Yeah, I mean, I wake up. I've had the same breakfast every day for 20 years.
Is that true?
Every single day, which is 2 eggs on an English muffin.
Wow.
I've never mixed it up. Even when I'm like at the fanciest place, I have 2 eggs on an English muffin. I'm a routine person. I take my dog for a walk. I do Orange Theory fitness. I alternate between mornings and night. And then I used to go straight to email, and now I try to go to like New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Instagram, and just try to ease into like the flood of. Yeah.
I check emails laying in bed in the first 5 minutes. It's just not healthy.
Yep.
And a lot of times I do, but I'm trying to just, again, there's bigger things in this world than a PR firm.
And are you, from the email standpoint, are you to a point now where you just don't even see any emails unless your employees or you're CC'd on almost everything?
We have aliases. So for like, Suja at Covet PR, and we have probably 25 clients now. And up until maybe 3 months ago, I was on every single alias. But now I'm on probably like 5 or 6 that are more strategic for me. But I probably get 400 or 500 emails a day.
That's crazy. Yeah. So what time do you wake up and get in the office, and kind of what's that routine like?
So it does vary based on meetings. I wake up at about 6:30. I try to be in the office, by 9, some days earlier, sometimes later if I have a meeting, and I try to head out 6:30. But I'm usually home watching Narcos and working at the same time.
And you usually, you try to, it sounds like you said 9 to 6, so you get home.
Yeah.
Always try to get home at the same time, no matter what type of
I try. Yeah. I mean, and again, you have events and commitments, but I like really relish in my quiet time. And it's actually a necessity now more than just a luxury to just turn off and to be with my husband and to be with our puppy. So it's really important that I set time in the schedule to do that.
Nice. You had the trifecta, so you had a kid, bought a house, and got married like in the same year.
That's too. We got married in November. We bought a house the day we left for our wedding.
Don't forget the puppy. That's big too.
We got a puppy. We're starting another company.
Your company's pretty much going to launch probably right when
month,
you. Oh, so even before your
hopefully,
due date.
Hopefully, yeah.
So that's a lot of stuff. So let's talk about the next 6 months. How I'm sure you're super anxious.
Yeah, and you say you're a routine person. Like with all the unexpecteds that are out there with that. How are you planning on setting your routine?
That's a great question. And when the day I found out I was pregnant, I'm like, I need to start interviewing nannies. I need to figure this out. And I'm trying to just take this pregnancy and what's going to happen and just kind of see how it goes. And, I have 4 months between now and the baby where I really need to set the company up for success even more and make sure everyone's feeling good. But I have no idea. That's the answer. And I'm trying to just roll with it.
I know some people that are watching are obviously inspired. Some of a cliche question, but being a woman in business as well. Yeah. I guess, even dealing with the pregnancy thing is a big deal as a business owner.
Yeah.
But what are some of the things you've learned or the advice you can give other women that are...
I feel very lucky in the sense that I've never felt biased that I'm a woman, but there are certain things, I was nervous to tell some clients that I'm having a baby, where I think if it was a man, it's like, well, your wife's going to be at home at the baby, but people are like, well, who's going to be on my account? And so
what if something happens?
And I at first I'm like, oh, well, nothing's going to change. I'm like, well, of course things are going to change, So I think motherhood will probably be the first real kind of incident where being a woman I'm going to see more of an effect on my business. But other than that, it's been very. Is there any
women mentors or people that you have reached out to or will reach out to kind of see that transition?
I have a few women mentors that absolutely have been helpful. And what I get told is, once you have a baby, everything's in perspective, and you're always going to care about your company, but there's a new sense of purpose, and I'm actually looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to having a secondary
kind
sense
of reset
of purpose.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And so we've talked about the end goal professionally, but personally, what's your end goal? Where do you want to be in 20, 50 years personally?
Sure. Hopefully have more than one child. Have a few kids. I would love to travel is my absolute favorite thing. So have have a lifestyle that allows me to still work, but also to travel kind of at leisure. And just being with friends and family. I don't have any lofty goals of like owning a plane or having a house in the Bahamas. I'm so happy with my life right now. So it's just, I think, having more time to do the things I want to do and be with the people.
So we'll give you the final word. Any last advice or thoughts on entrepreneurship or entrepreneurs out there? And
yeah, I would say you don't have to have a business plan. You don't have. You just have to have confidence, and if you're committed,
walk up to Damon John in a gown and be like, let's do this.
Yeah,
thing, you know?
Yeah. Go to FUBU, see some grills, know you're in the right place, and you can make it happen.
Cool. Sarah, thanks so much for the time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Excellent.
This was fun.
Thank you.
Good.